So we have a very special guest today, Dr. Jagdeep Singh Bachher, who is the University of California Chief Investment Officer. And he's managing a fund worth $157 billion. And if you're wondering, why do we have a Chief Investment Officer at an entrepreneurial conference, you will find out soon enough. But just one fact, if UC were considered a corporation, it probably has one of the largest R&D budgets of any company. They spend about $5 billion a year on R&D. About 5 patents per day are filed by UC. And so with that kind of stuff, they have an insight into what basic science, what new technologies are coming on the horizon. And obviously Sequoia is one of the companies that get lots of its money from UC Berkeley. So I will also invite the Thai Silicon Valley president, Anita Manwani, who is going to be in conversation with him and maybe answer some of these questions for all of you. One point that he made, which I'm hoping we'll all get the answers for, that we create money for future generations. So with that, let me welcome Anita and Jagdeep Singh.
With this incredible journey. A lot of us in the audience have probably only traveled 2 continents and then settled here. You've done 3. How did that come about?
Thank you for having me. And even though I can't see all of you, I'm pretty confident there's a larger population of Indian entrepreneurs in the audience today. So Sat Sri Akal, namaste to everybody in the audience. And I appreciate the invitation. I have been, even though I've traveled 3 continents, getting an invitation to TiE is a big deal, and getting an invitation to Keynote at TiE is a big deal, and this is my first grand keynote ever. So I think this is going to be the highlight of my entire journey. But to your question, my parents spent 20 years in India, 30 years in Nigeria, and then 30 years in Canada. And along that journey of 80 years, my sister and I had the opportunity to learn through the experiences of living around the world. Now, I think the most important thing we learned is the importance they gave to teaching. Both my parents are in their 80s and they still teach till today at a high school in Waterloo, Canada. So teaching is ingrained in the values of our family and education. And then of course, the things that they taught us were, live a simple life, keep it simple, live with honesty, truth, maintain your faith, have your identity. I'm proud to be a Sikh everywhere I've lived in the world. And so those are the things that have shaped my journey. And then of course, 16 years ago when I got married to my wife, I saw similar values in her upbringing and her family. And then together, in the last 9 years, we call California home. And honestly, I can't think of living anywhere else in my life now, having sort of made this home. So it's really just about the simple things, and I'm just happy, and I think we've learned this in COVID. The most important thing is having your family with you, your loved ones, and spending time on the things that matter. We all do cool things and we have great jobs and this, that, and the other. But I'm lucky to have my parents and be where I am in life today. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for sharing that. So what brought you to the UC? From, investment banking, from insurance, and then a public university in California?
So I was hired I was imported to the United States before the walls went up. And I made it right across the border 9 years ago. But I was really interviewed to come and join this prestigious institution. And I remember the phone call from the headhunter, and they said, listen, it may be that you don't get this job because you're not really a disciple of the endowment school of investing in the United States. You're not a white guy with blue eyes, candidly. And 9 years ago, you just didn't have the pedigree of any education at Harvard or Stanford or Columbia, or I never went to a school in the US, let alone having gone to the UC. I'm not quite sure why you hire me at the UC as well. But I went through 16 interviews, and the last set of interviews with 14 people, and somehow I made it through that process and I got here. I think I got here for two reasons. From now that I look back, I think the UC was looking for an individual who would help lead the investment assets of the university in a collaborative fashion, not in an isolated kind of ivory tower type approach. And I think secondly, they took a chance on me. I wasn't a tested, proven investor with a great success story. I was just another guy. But they somehow believed in me, and they thought that I would be able to sort of emerge from having been the number 2 guy doing it before to finally having that responsibility. But no one tells you how hard it is until you're in the number 1 spot doing that. So I was hired like anybody else. But I always, in the interview, it was interesting, they asked me if I had any closing comments. And I said, I was born in Nigeria, I went to Canada, and I actually worked in Edmonton, Alberta for 5 years before I came here. I said, you can hire whoever you want, and I can probably go to a couple of places for a job, but I think my heart was always set on the West Coast in California. I just happened to take a detour via Alberta to make it here. Maybe that won their heart in addition to sort of giving me a chance. But I'm like any one of you in the room. Everybody here has always asked someone to give them a chance. The University of California took a chance on me. It's tougher to get into school at the UC now, maybe, than it was to become the CIO 9 years ago. But that's the quality of our amazing educational system at the University of California.
Thank you. So, I think of all our journeys to California, and they're kind of similar. But most of our audience and my day is very typical. We go to a tech kind of office, and some of them go to an investment office, but you've got 160 billion that you are dispersing in some form or the other. What's a typical day for Jagdeep?
So a typical day for me now, after COVID, is very different than a typical day for me before COVID. Before COVID, I was like on a hamster wheel, like a chicken with my head cut off, running everywhere in the world, doing everything I could. Here's what a typical day looks like today. There's a bit of an echo here. I try not to take any meetings before 1:30 in the afternoon, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. I take meetings between 1:30 and 4:30 on those 3 days. And I don't take any meetings on Monday and Friday. So that's my day. No lunches with people, no dinners, no breakfast. I have a 9-year-old and a 15-year-old, and it's much more fun to be with them at home than schmoozing at fun events like we all tend to get invitations for. So that's a typical day now. Now, why do I spend my time like that for the most part? Is because when you're investing, you have to have time to think. You have to have time to read. You have to have time to absorb all the information that is coming at you from all over the world. And if you don't have time to do that, it can impact your ability to think clearly and be patient. The decisions we make as an investor, particularly at the University of California in our office, have implications for 100 years. Why do I say that to you? because our team, and my team is here in the front row, some of them, we have been investing the university's assets for 91 years. We have 280,000 students. We have 300,000 faculty and staff. We have 10 campuses, and we're third largest employer in California. The decisions we make are not measured this week or next week. We're not a public company. The choices we make are based on decisions that will impact future generations. For those of you that went to school at the University of California or have a kid that is in school or aspires to go to school at the University of California, what is incredible about our system is 47% of our kids are on Pell Grants. Many of them are the first in their families' generations to go to school. We are the largest public research university in the United States, and by definition, planet Earth. Therefore, we're trying to work with our community to make sure that future generations have the resources they need to succeed. And in order to do that, it doesn't matter what happens today or tomorrow or next week. So I try to remind myself that as an investor, the importance of patience and thinking about the long term. Whilst we talk about it, I need to practice it. Before COVID, this was not me. After COVID, this is more of me. And I hope I can continue to do it this way, because some of the biggest decisions I have made in the last 9 years have come through this formula or this approach I have applied. Now, of course, my wife thinks I should do yoga, and there's all kinds of other things I should also do. But like you, I like to walk every day. I like to make sure we get in those 10,000 steps, 5 miles. And I don't sit down at the office. That's why I'm standing here with you. I kind of don't know what it is like to sit down anymore. So a typical day is really spent thinking about future generations.
So you're spending a lot of time thinking about future generations, and you told me once that you spend a lot of time checking every word in the annual reports, picking every graph that appears. And when you sent me those annual reports, I thought, oh my God, I have to go through all these numbers. But they were works of art. What inspiring.
So when I joined the University of California 9 years ago, there was nothing in my office. I'm a minimalist most of the time, but there was one book on my desk. It was a blue book. And it was annual reports of the investment assets from 1963 to 1995 for 32 years, 10 years before I was born. And no one left me an operating manual on how to invest for the university. Nobody left me any instructions on what to do on the first day of the job. So I skimmed through this book, and I kept looking at it for a while. And I realized that my job at the UC is finite. My time at the University of California is finite. And my contributions will also be finite. And that's true about almost anything and everything in life. I think we get too wedded to whatever we do, thinking there is no expiry date or there is no end point. But the reality, there always is. So it also dawned on me that the importance of annual reports on my desk were to remind me of the history that the institution has. And therefore, my job and my team's job is to ensure that the foundation we create today is going to have a new history that will be charted over the time I'm there. Now, when I joined, we were about $80 to $90 billion in assets, endowment, retirement, banking, insurance type assets. So I realized that one of the most important things I can do every day or at the end of a year is take the time to write the journey. So I obsess over this. And Diane is looking at me and she knows that this is my absolute passion, is to sit down and think about the story for this year, why it matters, what it says, and how to tell it to the 500,000 to 600,000 people in our community. So I take the time for months. I pick every word. I work very closely with Diane, my chief of staff. We articulate the message. We pick the charts. We pick the colors, and we go through this experience in a very fun way, because you got to have fun. By the way, this year I'm thinking mint green might be the color for the annual report. I've already started thinking about that. It's kind of like the Tiffany box. So by doing that, what it does is it gives me an opportunity to chart the journey over the last year. And that journey will define the history of the time that I spend with my team at the University of California. And it inspires me when I read about it 3 years from now. Every time I start to write a new annual report, I go back and read every previous annual report that I wrote to remember where I came from so I can figure out where we're going. And this is just a passion of mine. And candidly, not just is it a passion of mine, even the designers we use. In fact, on the 16th of May, they just got the Art Director of New York. They got a gold and 2 silver medal awards for our annual report this year. So it really is a work of art and a work of thinking and a work of a journey. But most importantly, when I'm gone and the next CIO comes in, it'll tell you why we made the decisions that are going to impact the next 100 years of how we invest for the benefit of your kids.
Thank you. Thanks for sharing that passion. I'm curious, if I asked Diane what it's like to work for you, what would she say?
I'm a tough boss. I pay a lot of attention to detail. It sounds like a job interview. Maybe I should get Diane up here to answer that question. It's a tough job. And I think any leader in this room, and you're all leaders, you're investors, you're entrepreneurs, our responsibilities and our jobs do not end in the technical products that we develop or in the GUI interfaces or the modern language models that we invent and artificial intelligence that we cook up. It doesn't end there. You have to worry about the ethical implications of what you design. You have to worry about how it impacts human beings. You have to think about the social implications of your decisions and your actions. So I think my job is tough, yet it's exciting in a way, because it isn't just about investing. If I just was investing, that would be one thing. But I have to think about climate change. I have to think about fossil fuels and the risks we take by investing in fossil fuels. I have to think about environmental, social governance issues. I have to think about, lately, the affordable housing crisis we have in California and the blue states and the United States of America. I have to think about the importance of diversity, equity, and inclusion, and why it is important to have women and people of color in the roles that we want them to succeed in. And I have to think about why 98% of the white men in America are the ones that are managing, or 98% of the money that's managed in America is by white men. These are issues that go beyond investing, but left unaddressed, they make the life of an investor very difficult. So I can be tough and I can be challenging because of the complexity of the issues, but because we work on these tough things, We're hoping we can make things better for our university and broadly for society, and we can make a small difference in having an impact because of the investments that we make and the choices that we are afforded to make on a daily basis.
Put a hand, and of course, as a woman, I'm happy to hear that sentiment. But I'll come back to that.
Sure.
I wanted to kind of ask you, the whole axis of collaboration is changing now,
Right.
especially in the post-pandemic world. And for many folks in Silicon Valley now, we have two big banks here that have failed and that are
Unfortunately.
resurrecting themselves. So what do you see the outlook in the next 24 months for both investors and entrepreneurs?
The short answer to your question is cash is a good place to invest your money for 24 months because you'll probably pick up anywhere between 4 to 6%. If that's not the answer you were looking for, I'll give you a slightly longer answer than 24 months. Let me start with the United States. I've always believed that there are two very deep competitive advantages that the United States has. One is innovation, and two is education. And you think about it. People from all over the world and anybody in the US wants to send their kids and their family members to the best schools. That is the beauty of the United States educational system. University of California is a recipient of this incredible talent from India, from China, and from the rest of the world. But it's not constrained to the UC, it's all over the US. You went to school in Ohio and all other places are great educational institutions. That is a competitive advantage. But let me come to innovation. See, in the 80s, when the birth of the semiconductor and venture capital as an industry here in Silicon Valley kind of began a whole new journey of what we all read about as the innovation economy. And we're now at a point where there are natural limitations to Moore's law in terms of the amount of chips you can manufacture and put on devices. And there's also new types of intelligence that has been invented, however you want to add a label to that kind of intelligence. But these are the things that America has as its deep competitive advantages. But they also are the things that America deeply has to protect. And we have to protect it because whilst we collaborate with the rest of the world, we also now deeply compete with the rest of the world. And it's that deep competition that is changing, I think, the axis of power on planet Earth. So if you think about only 3 participants on planet Earth, there's many more. A country called China, a country called the United States, and a country called India. The US economy is about $30 trillion in size. 334 million people, and approximately $80,034 in GDP per capita. That's the US. China and India, 30 years ago, China had a $900 billion GDP, and India had a $340 billion GDP, not 30 years ago. 30 years later, China is a $19.7 trillion economy with 1.4 billion people and approximately $14,000 in GDP per capita. India is $3.5 trillion economy with just a little bit more than 1.4 billion people and about $2,061 in GDP per capita. Just think about that. China is quickly coming up to the heels of the United States. And India will grow. Whether India grows from 3.5 to 7 or $10 trillion, 15% of that has to come from IT services. So what we are witnessing in this lifetime is a balance of power that's shifting. Now, I'm not including Europe. I think Europe is disorganized and complicated and they need to figure things out for themselves. I think the Middle East is going to benefit from the oil boom and all the dollars they have and sprinkling that around the world. But I think these three powers in the world will have an enormous impact of shifting the balance and the axis of power. And I think it is going to be very difficult to navigate, but it's probably going to be the most incredible set of opportunities over the next 10 to 20 years. And that's the world we live in, and the answers are absolutely unclear. You need time to think about them, and then you need to make bets, but don't make them for 24 months, because in the last 2 years, the Chinese stock market was down quite a bit. You could have lost all your money, even though it might be the best bet over the next 30 years.
The 24 months was obviously driven by Silicon Valley culture, so I'll come back to what you call the hubris in Silicon Valley. Say more.
I think we need more humility generally in society versus hubris. It really bothers me that 4 venture capitalists didn't wake up in the morning and each write $1 billion check to Silicon Valley Bank. It really does bug me, because it could have been done and it would have saved Silicon Valley Bank. And 40 years of providing deep relationships to companies in this room, and you let it wither away. I cannot describe that in any other way than hubris, personally. And I mean it with every ounce of my body. Now, that hubris doesn't stop in the way we treat people. We have a deep problem with the lack of women and people of color and minorities in almost all walks of life, particularly technology and financial services. Now, I'm not talking about Indians. Okay, look, let's just get the facts on the table. Most big tech companies are run by Indians. Indians make up a large chunk of Silicon Valley in the tech industry. But you have to remember, California is a majority minority state. 47% of the population in this state are Latino or Latina, and 5% are African Americans. We need to see more people of color in the financial services industry, in tech companies. And I think we've made progress on women. Absolutely not enough. These are the types of things that you have to intentionally focus on as a leader, because if you don't do it intentionally, you revert back to the old boys network, the old boys club. And you know what? This is 2023. We can't do that anymore. So the choices we make, and the reason our job is tough, is because when we look at the University of California and we look at our students that actually represent California, we can't turn around and say 98% of the money should go to white men. Can't do it. Impossible. So our record is not great. It's low because the bar is also very low, but we're inching our way up. And as a leader, my job is to remind myself of the criticality of the role that we play and how we have to make progress on these types of things. I don't hang out in Silicon Valley. I live in Oakland. I get a different picture of California than you do in Palo Alto. It's a picture I like to get every day because it's the reality that I live in. And that's not hubris. That's Main Street. Not everybody needs to aspire to be a billionaire. It's not all about billions. It's not all about TV shows on Netflix. It's not all about succession. It really is about making sure we can have a better world for our kids, our daughters, our sons, and candidly, Californians. We have a lot of crises that we need to work our way through. So this is more of, there's a lot in there, but I think we have some problems. And if you don't acknowledge you have a problem in life, you're never going to solve anything.
Thank you for sharing this, the human side of looking at these things. In all your reports, talk a lot about the UC investment way. And earlier we talked a little bit about human meets machine, but I'm actually going to change that question. What is your favorite value that you use when you are making investment decisions?
Less is more. That's it. I do fewer things in a day. I meet fewer people. I give out fewer business cards. I have fewer items in my portfolio. I have lots of turbans and shoes, to the dismay of my wife, but I actually like the turbans and the shoes. But less is more. And that's because I think in order to manage risk, which is really what the job of an investor is, the fewer things you have to worry about, the easier your job becomes as an investor to be able to navigate a very complicated world. And in the last 3 years, the list of things that as individuals and investors we've had to work our way through can get pretty alarming. Luckily, because less is more and we've done fewer things, we've been able to find a way to focus on new opportunities in healthcare, in data warehouses. We just invested in a company out of UC with UCLA professor that's working on ovarian cancer, for which there's nothing. We still have to address climate change. I like to keep my life simple and spend the time to think and figure out where the world is going, because that's where we can put the money to work. And you need the clarity and the headspace to be able to do that. And the more you have to worry about, the less you can focus on the future.
Well, I'd love to say that less is more in this session,
I think
but we
done.
are out of time. So
Okay.
thank you so much for one, agreeing to be here and sharing everything.
Thank you. Let me give you a hug. Appreciate it. Now I can come down and see everybody, because we couldn't see too many people up here.